Hi folks, welcome to RJ Impact. Today we're going to be talking about week 5 in the Holmes Theranos trial. You can search this channel for previous week's updates and also for a more detailed video on the background to Theranos and Holmes' journey to the point at which this trial commenced. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification button so you don't miss out on any future videos. As a reminder, Elizabeth Holmes is in court accused of multiple instances of fraud against doctors, patients and investors in connection with her role as CEO of Theranos, and this is week 5 of that trial.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Before we talk about this week's witness testimony and goings on at the trial, we'll take a little diversion with the background bonus section and talk about a dog. Yes, that's right, a dog. In particular, this was Elizabeth's dog, and to be open, the source for this little factoid was one of the Vanity Fair articles from early 2019. Anyway, Elizabeth decided she wanted a dog, so at the company's expense, she had a chauffeur take her to the airport, flew first class across the country, and was again chauffeured to a dog breeder, where she bought a Siberian Husky. Its name was already decided by Holmes, Balto. Apparently, this is the name of a famous sled dog that in 1925 led a team of Huskies 600 miles across Alaska to deliver medicines. There's a clear metaphor here, isn't there, for the long struggle culminating in a success that Holmes was seeking to emulate in her and Theranos' own journey. Anyway, she decided to bring the dog to work. She would take it through the labs to the consternation of the scientists who knew that its shedding hairs would contaminate their samples. She brushed them off when confronted by this. Not being trained, it would poop and pee everywhere, including in board meetings, and poor assistants would need to run around cleaning up the mess. Like most dogs, there is a genetic trace of full origin in Huskies. Apparently that became the fact for Holmes, and in meetings, cafes and in general, whenever anyone inquired about the pup, Holmes would state, "He's a wolf." The Vanity Fair article implies that this was Holmes' personal idiosyncrasy and branding device, emulating the fact that other Silicon Valley CEOs, Jobs, Zuckerberg, etc. had their own idiosyncrasies. Secondly, in this section, a viewer asked, given the number of counts, 11, does the 20-year sentencing maximum apply to each count? Well, yes it does, and this is a really great point. An extract from the Attorney's Office of Northern California states the following. If convicted, the defendants face a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison and a fine of $250,000 plus restitution for each count of wire fraud and for each conspiracy count. And this is specifically about the Holmes Balwani trial, so yes, 20 years for each count. So as well as forfeiture, of which you can find out more in my video entitled Holmes Trial the Indictment, we have a fine potential of 11 counts times $250,000 and jail time of 11 counts times 20 years, and that would imply a maximum fine of $2.75 million and 220 years in jail. The government has been releasing previous sealed documents, and this week we saw some that contain notes from interviews with Paige Williams, who was a personal assistant to Holmes. From these we found out that Holmes moved to commercial flights rather than chartered planes when the Wall Street Journal articles were published. Paige would be required to manage the gardener and housekeeper, as well as go shopping for Holmes at high-end department stores like Neiman Marcus. On one occasion, each of Holmes and Balwani asked her to arrange Valentine's Day flowers for the other. Personally, I'm curious as to whether the boundary between the company's resources and Holmes' personal resources had been crossed by Holmes. She should not be using company resources for her personal use. There may, of course, be a contract between her and the company allowing her to do this, so we can't be sure, but the boundary does seem to be pretty close here. I mentioned in one of my earlier week's videos that Holmes has been seen most days walking to court hand in hand with her mother. I commented on it being odd at the time, but couldn't quite put my finger on what was going on. Well, she's continued to do this most days, and I did see her hand in hand with her partner on one day, and then it clicked. The message that is being sent is that of somebody who has been abused and has regressed as a result of that abuse and is looking for comfort on a primal level. In other words, from the protective people around her, the mother being such a cliche in this case. Let me know if you think the same or otherwise. Also, last week we lost another juror. Apparently their Buddhist beliefs would prevent them from returning a verdict, and the reason for this is because she must practice compassion, love and forgiveness as part of her religion, and as a result would feel guilty every day for the rest of her life if Elizabeth was sent to prison. The judge tried to persuade her to stay, but this wasn't successful, and this is surely a blow for the defence to have someone with such compassion for Holmes, who to this point, by the way, hasn't said a word, would have been a huge benefit to her. Her replacement alternate juror expressed similar uneasiness after being seated on the main bench. The juror said that she had concerns about how her role deciding a verdict would affect Holmes' future. "She's so young," the juror said while looking at Holmes. "I don't know if I'm 100% ready to participate in something like this. Being English is not my first language, so I don't know." Judge de Villa reminded the juror that she would not be responsible for possible punishment in the case, and a diverse jury is important, and the number of alternate jurors is now down to 3. Anyway, that's enough of that. We'll comment some more on Holmes' personal lifestyle and spending habits in next week's background bonus. Adam Rosendorf. We had Rosendorf take the stand again. The 5th day was Tuesday and the 6th day Wednesday. It was the defence's legal team again who continued their questioning, obviously trying to undermine his testimony for the prosecution. He was questioned about testimony by Erica Chung, and if you remember, she was the lab assistant that testified that Theranos manipulated test data. Rosendorf testified that when the Edison undertook particular tests, there would be 6 data points and Theranos would discard 2 of these and use the best 4. As Rosendorf signed off on these tests and was asked by Lance Wade, "And you approved of that?" Rosendorf essentially said that while it was unusual, he thought it was reasonable. We also saw evidence that contradicted Rosendorf's assertion that the company was reluctant to address Theranos device issues. They pointed to an email from Bawani sent 2 minutes after Rosendorf raised a specific issue and asking for an investigation. An employee worked late into the evening on the issue to pull data and set up a study to investigate, and Wade said, "That doesn't look like reluctance, and that's a good team effort, right?" Rosendorf had to agree. And this was just the start for Rosendorf. The pressure ramped up. The prosecution pointed to another case where Rosendorf had said that Theranos didn't have more test failures than other labs he'd worked at, and that's 180 degrees from what you said in your testimony, Wade asked. "Yes, it seems to be different," said Rosendorf. Rosendorf was shown an email from 2014 where he said to a colleague that he was aware of only one instance where incorrect test data was given to a patient. He was also challenged that he'd wanted to initiate a whistleblower lawsuit against Theranos. Now, this is where the government has put an initiative together to encourage whistleblowing against illegal practices, so there is actually a financial incentive for Rosendorf to be successful in such a case. Wade said to Rosendorf that this was the real reason he sent over 150 emails to his personal account, and Rosendorf disagreed with that. The prosecution sought to ask questions about 2 companies that Rosendorf worked for after Theranos, and both have had their own issues. Essentially, the prosecution are trying to promote evidence to undermine Rosendorf's credibility. The one disallowed by the judge was a company called Ubiome Incorporated, which had been under federal investigation over billing practices and which filed for bankruptcy protection. There were false reimbursement claims in the case, and the judge ruled it out of the line of questioning because the jury might draw a conclusion that Rosendorf himself was somehow involved. The one that was allowed by the judge was a company called PerkinElmer Incorporated, where Rosendorf joined as a lab director. It had testing deficiencies uncovered by federal inspectors, and Rosendorf himself admitted that he risked losing his licence as a lab director after federal inspectors found issues in the testing processes. Rosendorf had said that he'd responded to the findings and that he faced a 2-year suspension of his director's licence. Apparently, the inspectors who investigated PerkinElmer's lab were the same ones who investigated the Theranos lab. Judge Davila at this point wondered about symbiosis being in play and said, oh, maybe it's just a pure coincidence. I've got to say, in my opinion, as Rosendorf's testimony comes to an end, the defence has done a very good job in undermining his credibility. He was brought in by the prosecution to say that there were issues in the company with its Edison machines and testing, and that Holmes knew about them. He has had to admit that management had supported him when he raised issues, and was actually shown emails to himself where this support seems to be pretty robust. He's also the one who developed the Edison testing processes and had to admit that he was the one who developed the data manipulation required. The defence also undermined Erica Chung's earlier testimony, as they were able to pinpoint that Erica was not using Rosendorf's own testing procedures, and this is why the Edison machines were failing tests, when in fact, under the correct procedures, they would have been okay. And the final blow was that they've shown he's actually having professional problems and potentially could lose his lab licence. You could say that the defence have got close to making Rosendorf look incompetent. The judge actually weighed in on defence attorney Lance Wade at one point during their long and continuing cross-examination of Rosendorf, and he rebuked Wade for, in quotes, piling on. Steve Bird. At last on Wednesday we had a new witness. Bird was the former Safeway CEO, and he said that he had repeated delays with Theranos blood testing machines, and these raised red flags about his company's failed multi-million-dollar partnership with the healthcare startup. He said deadlines were continuing to be missed and we often weren't given an explanation for that. I kept asking, give me some details here. And that was the frustrating part. We always tried to help them any way we could. Safeway actually spent more than $300 million to put clinics in hundreds of its grocery stores in advance of the blood testing technology. The idea was that while you were shopping and before you leave, you're going to get the results of that blood test. On Holmes herself, he said he was very impressed. There are very few people I had met in business that I would actually say are charismatic. She was charismatic. She was very smart, and she was doing one of the hardest things you can do in a business, and that's to create an enterprise from scratch. Bird testified that he viewed the partnership with Theranos as an opportunity for Safeway to expand into the healthcare world. However, repeated delays with the mini-labs raised red flags. Bird also testified that Holmes demonstrated the device at a board meeting. They ran a prostate-specific antigen test on a board member. Bird recalled that blood was drawn, it went into the machine, and we never got a result. He also testified that Holmes never disclosed to him that she was in a romantic relationship with Balwani. It just raises the question of what else is hidden, he said. And that's it for the week. There's no Friday hearing this week due to the Columbus Day holiday. Week 5 in a nutshell. As usual, we'll try to condense the whole week down to the bare essentials. Adam Rosendorf, Theranos Lab Director. He finally finished testifying after 6 very long days. He actually approved of and devised the Theranos machine's testing processes. There were more emails read out this week which were to Rosendorf and demonstrated management support to get those issues resolved. One email that was from Rosendorf himself stated that Theranos didn't have any more issues than any other lab. He was accused of becoming a whistleblower for personal gain and not altruistic reasons. The company he's now working for has been investigated for testing issues and he faces losing his lab license as a result. Steve Bird, ex-CEO of Safeway. He tried to set up a partnership with Theranos, and Safeway spent $300 million in anticipation of that partnership. He was very impressed with Holmes as a person and her charisma. Theranos blood testing machines raised red flags for him due to the delays, and he wasn't told about Holmes Balwani's relationship. So that's it. Don't forget, these are all prosecution witnesses at the moment, and thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss out on any future videos when they are published.